In August 2017, Paris Saint-Germain broke the world transfer record, signing Neymar from Barcelona for €222 million. The deal changed the transfer market forever and created a firestorm of controversy. It also sent Barcelona into a recruiting tailspin. And this is the story of the 4 players that they signed and what happened to them. Neymar's departure was a trauma for Barcelona. It broke up the attacking trident that he'd formed with Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez, but it was also politically damaging. PSG simply activated the Brazilian's release clause, and then there was no negotiation. It was a huge dent to Barcelona's ego and then President Josep Bartomeu. On the plus side, they were almost €250 million richer, or at least that might have been the plus side. Neymar became a PSG player on the 4th of August 2017, and the weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The previous month, the club had already signed fullback Nelson Semedo from Benfica for €35 million, so he was already on board, as were defender Marlon and former academy graduate Gerard Deulofeu. But 10 days after Neymar's departure, they spent a further €30 million on Paulinho, the Brazilian midfielder who'd been playing for Guangzhou Evergrande in China. Paulinho had previously been a disaster for Premier League side Tottenham, and he was a strange candidate to reclaim hearts and minds. He would last just a single season before being loaned and eventually sold back to Guangzhou for an eyebrow-raising €42 million. But towards the end of the August in 2018, Barcelona began their heavy reinvestment. Ousmane Dembele had made a name for himself at Borussia Dortmund, becoming one of Europe's most exhilarating wide forwards under Thomas Tuchel. The trouble for Barcelona was that everyone knew exactly how much money they had to spend, and just how much pressure they were under to secure a marquee signing. Dortmund were shrewd negotiators at the best of times, let alone with such leverage. The price agreed for Dembele was €140 million, which was 4 times what the German club had spent in signing him from Rennes just 13 months earlier. It was a record sale for a German team and the second highest transfer fee in history. Dembele had even gone on strike in an attempt to force through his move, but it had no effect on Dortmund's resolve. The Bundesliga side would spend €20 million of that revenue on Jadon Sancho, who they would also sell for an enormous profit just a few years later. Dembele remains at Barcelona today, a polarising figure who's had peaks and troughs and tremendous difficulty with injuries. The first suffered just a month after his arrival, and yet he is still one of the most talented wide forwards in the world. But protracted as it was, his signing wasn't even the most complicated. No, the biggest saga involved Liverpool's Philippe Coutinho, who was determined to leave the Premier League. Now, Barca's interest predated the Neymar sale. Back in July of 2017, speculation about the Brazilian playmaker had reached such a pitch that Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp had to confront the stories, rejecting the notion that Coutinho would be sold for €70 million. But the saga dragged on. In August, Sky Sports reported that Coutinho was unhappy with his treatment and had formally requested a transfer. The trouble was that Coutinho had only signed a new Liverpool contract in January of that year, 6 months before, and with no release clause or pressure on the club to sell, he was going nowhere. The club's owners, the Fenway Sports Group, even issued a statement saying that they wouldn't even consider offers for the player. That, of course, would change in the new year. Barcelona enjoyed an excellent first half of the season. They were unbeaten in La Liga, had led the table since matchday 3 and had topped their Champions League group. And yet they couldn't let the Coutinho situation rest. On January the 6th of 2018, it was announced that Liverpool and Barcelona had agreed a transfer that was potentially worth up to €135 million. Commenting, Jurgen Klopp was quoted as saying, "Philippe was insistent with me, the owners and even his teammates, that this was a move that he was desperate to make happen. Despite that, we managed to keep the player here beyond the summer window, hoping that we'd be able to persuade him to stay and be a part of what we're looking to do." Well, they weren't able to persuade him. Instead, they used the proceeds from his sale to strengthen a side that would reach the Champions League final that summer, win the tournament the very next year, and capture the Premier League in 2020. Coutinho started his Barcelona career quite well and was part of the team that won La Liga in 2018 and 2019. That material success never made him popular though, or created the sense that he was positionally or tactically suited to Ernesto Valverde, the Barcelona manager. He seemed to wither under the Camp Nou pressure, a trend which repeated when he was loaned to Bayern Munich in the summer of 2019. The German side would pass on the option to make the deal permanent, and he would return to Barcelona, appearing semi-frequently before eventually leaving on loan to Aston Villa in January 2022 and permanently for €20 million that summer. And that leaves just one more player, Yerry Mina, an equally strange case. In January 2018, the towering central defender was signed for €12 million, becoming the first ever Colombian to play for Barcelona. But the trouble was, he didn't really play much. He would get just 400 minutes of pitch time under Valverde, and his self-belief was shattered. Reflecting on the period in 2020, he told the Colombian edition of Marca that, "The few minutes I did get out on the pitch, I played badly. I felt like everything was bringing me down, that nothing was going right, that I couldn't even make a pass in training." Mercifully, his Barcelona career would last just 6 months. And yet somehow Barca almost tripled their money on Mina, selling him on to Everton for €30 million, for whom he still plays today. A bizarre end to a bizarre period, and a whirlwind of a year in which Barcelona's world was turned upside down. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.